Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm from the British Dragonfly Society. We're a small but mighty charity which focuses on the conservation of dragonflies and their wetland habitats. I'm really excited to talk to you about dragonflies today. If you aren't already fans of dragonflies, hopefully you will be. And it's hard not to be. They are amazing for lots of different reasons, but let's start right at the beginning. Dragonflies are incredibly old. They are flying fossils. They evolved over 300 million years ago. That's before dinosaurs. That's 50 million years before dinosaurs. Their ancestors are often known as griffin flies. The fossil records for them give us some really good information about their structure and how similar they are to the dragonflies that we see today. One big difference is that a lot of these griffin flies were a lot larger than our dragonflies we see today. One fossil record shows a species that has a wingspan of 70 centimeters, which is very, very impressive. It's thought that during that time, the increased oxygen in the atmosphere allowed some of our insects to be a lot bigger than they are today. And probably a lack of predators too. These would have been one of the first things to take to the skies. So they would have been top of their food chain. The world would have looked very different back then. The continents would still be stuck together. And the plants that we think of in sort of Jurassic Park, tree ferns, would have made the landscape look a lot different. But what do we see today? Well, we don't see dragonflies as large as that, but they're just as spectacular. We have over 6,000 species globally, but there's likely to be many more that just haven't been discovered yet. Dragonflies and damselflies are really beautiful and diverse insects, and we collectively call them dragonflies. So when we're talking about both dragonflies and damselflies, which you can see on the slide here, we refer to them collectively as dragonflies. They are really recognizable as having four wings, that elongated body, and very impressive flight. But how do we tell these two groups apart? Well, you might be able to already see some structural differences between the two. Our dragonflies here on the left have their wings out flat like an aeroplane when they're at rest. So this one's perched here and the wings are out like an aeroplane. They're usually larger and faster flyers than damselflies. And if you look, their forewing, their front wing is a slightly different shape to their back wing. And their eyes are really large and they take up most of their head. Whereas a damselfly is smaller, they look a little bit like matchsticks, little skinny matchsticks. Their wings are held together, usually along their body, as you can see here. They're all the same shape. And their eyes are a bit smaller, they're on the sides of their head. So those are some top tips to tell the two groups apart. But what kind of diversity do we see in the UK? Well, we get a huge array of wonderful colours, and we get 46 species that breed or are regular migrants to Britain. So 46 species usually. But we do occasionally get a further 10 that we call vagrants. So they move over from the continent depending on weather conditions that year. All of our dragonflies like slightly different habitats. You'll find them in slightly different places. Some really like garden ponds or small ponds. Some like really large lakes. Others prefer smaller water bodies like canals or rivers and ditches. And some particularly like boggy marshland that you see in, say, Scotland or North Wales. All of our dragonflies play a really important role within the food chain of a freshwater ecosystem. They eat insects, so they are amazing at controlling balance. They especially like midges, which is great news for us. But they also get eaten themselves, as is the circle of that food chain. And their presence, dragonflies in a wetland, often indicates good water quality and a healthy habitat. So we can use these guys as indicators of whether we have a healthy ecosystem. But of course, we don't have a great track record of looking after our wetlands in the UK. The way that we use our land and change the way we use our land massively affects wetlands, and pollution can have a huge impact too from industry or from agriculture. So it's really important to think about how we look after wetland spaces, because even though we see these beautiful insects flying about, they actually spend most of their time underwater. So let's take a little look at the life cycle of a dragonfly. As I mentioned, they spend a lot of their time underwater, hence, healthy wetland habitats with good water quality is imperative for their survival. But they go through a magnificent transformation from these strange water dwelling creatures into a really colourful flying dragonfly. They live underwater as eggs, which then hatch into larvae, which you can see here. We have a large red damselfly larvae on the left and a southern hawker dragonfly on the right, which is a bit larger. Even during this stage underwater, they're incredible hunters. So they eat at every opportunity. They eat lots of small water invertebrates like bloodworms and water fleas, um, but sometimes slightly larger things like snails and tadpoles, and the larger dragonflies taking small fish as well. They're an incredible hinged jaw in this stage of their life, which can spring out like an extra hand and grab prey under the water. They spend on average about 2 years underwater as larvae, which is a huge amount of time. Some species even longer. One dragonfly, the golden ringed dragonfly, spends 5 years underwater. When they're ready to leave, it takes an amazing transformation to take them into their adult form. So our dragonflies climb out of the water onto a piece of vegetation and hold on tight. So this is all happening on the edge of a pond or a lake. And they find a weak spot at the back of the larval skin and push their head and thorax out. So you can see this is the head here and thorax beginning to pull out. They then lean back. Gravity helps them out here. They lean all the way back and pull their legs out. The wings are still vacuum packed in these little sacs on their back at this point. And they stay like this for a little while, gaining the energy to reach up and pull the bottom half out of that larval skin. So what's left behind on the vegetation here is what we call an exuvia. That's the skin of the larva. So there's nothing left in there. The wings then begin to unfold from those little wing sacs. And at this stage, you can see it's not very colourful. It takes a while for them to develop the lovely colour that we see in adults. So at this point, they're quite soft and a bit vulnerable. Often birds will try to nab them at this point. You can see this dragonfly is already starting to gain some of its gorgeous colour. And in a second, the wings will open and it'll be ready to take its first ever flight. At this stage, they've got a lot of feeding to do. That whole process has taken a lot of energy. So, usually, after adults have emerged, they actually move away from water to feed. So, sometimes you'll see dragonflies and you think, gosh, we're nowhere near any water. Well, that's completely normal. They'll need to do a lot of feeding. So, they go out and spend most of their day eating, and then they only return to water when they're ready to mate. So when they fully matured and they're ready to mate. This is a 4-spot chaser male here, and he's found a perch over the perfect wetland territory, and he's guarding that territory. So he is chasing off other males and chasing after any females that come into his spot. Some species like this are very territorial, others less so. Um, but they'll be very keen to defend a really good patch of wetland if they find it. So he's on the lookout for a female. When he finds her, the mating in dragonflies is really unique. The male holds on to the female with claspers that he has at the end of his tail. And he holds on either to the back of her head, like you see in dragonflies, or the back of the neck that you see in damselflies. And then they both lift their abdomen to meet each other. And this puts them into a tandem pair. And the full connection when their abdomens meet, we then call that the wheel or heart position. So when this has occurred, the female then is ready to lay eggs. Females can lay hundreds of eggs over the course of a few days or even a few weeks. Some species will lay eggs into plant material. Some will even lay into rotting wood or into mud. This species here is the emperor dragonfly, and she is laying her eggs into the stems, into the plant material of water lily, just under the water surface. Other species will drop their eggs directly into water. So often the male will stand on guard to prevent any other male from coming in and meeting with the female. This pair here are common darters, and more than just staying on guard, this male is still attached to the female and is helping her lay her eggs into the water. The eggs will then hatch into larvae, taking us back to the beginning of our life cycle circle. Adults in their flying stage will live for, on average, 6 weeks to 8 weeks, so about 2 months if they're lucky. So as I mentioned, on average, 2 years underwater and then about 2 months as flying adults. So actually, most of their life is spent hidden away under the water. But they make the most of their time in the skies, and they have amazing adaptations that allow them to be absolute incredible aerial predators. Dragonflies have incredible vision. So they have 2 large compound eyes, as you can see here on our dragonfly and damselfly. Slightly different shapes on the 2 groups, but you can see all those lenses in that compound eye. So up to about 30,000 lenses. And they have almost 360 vision. We think about 320 with just a small blind spot at the very, very back. Each part of their compound eye structure has a different function. Some are very sensitive to movement, others to color, others to flight patterns. And they can put all that together to be incredible hunters, to be able to avoid predators and find and defend territory as well as finding a mate using those incredible eyes. They have amazing color vision and can see into UV as well. But they team those amazing eyes up with their incredible wing structure, which then makes them excellent predators. They are phenomenal flyers. So they can fly up to 30 miles an hour, which is incredible, incredibly fast. But they are more than speed. They are very agile and they can use their wings in incredible ways. So they can hover like a helicopter, they can glide, they can fly backwards, they can turn on the spot. And this is all made possible by the structure of their wings. So each wing can be used separately. So it can operate independently of the others. And the complex veins that you can see that create these wonderful corrugations on the wings make the wing really flexible but strong at the same time. Thanks to these wings and that incredible eyesight, they have a 95% success rate of catching their dinner, which actually makes them the most successful hunters in the world. That's out of all of our hunting mammals. These are the most effective predators in the world. But what do they go after? We've mentioned that they eat midges a lot and lots of small insects, but they can eat some larger insects or bees and wasps and butterflies, as you can see in this picture. And sometimes other dragonflies and damselflies too, that does happen. They are ferocious eaters. They have an untouchable appetite because they use so much energy flying and defending territory and finding a mate. They need to eat a lot. They're able to track and calculate the trajectory of their target. So as they see a prey item that they want to catch, they're able to calculate where it'll be, and then they can fly to intercept it on its flight path, which is absolutely incredible. Despite their skills as predators, they are prey themselves as well. There are times in their life cycle where they're vulnerable. So this is an example of a large red damselfly here that's been on the water, maybe laying eggs or finding a mate, and has been caught by a newt. So when they're laying eggs, they're vulnerable when they're newly emerged. And some of our larger dragonflies often get caught by birds of prey, like the hobby. So still an important part of the cycle. So hopefully now you are in awe of how incredible these insects are. You'll now want to know where you can go out and find them. Well, some of the best places to find them will be any good quality wetland habitat. So ponds and lakes, of course. But then you've also got nice wetland, marshy areas, whether that's bogs or areas of connected ditches. Some species like slow flowing rivers too, so don't rule out your rivers. Fast flowing rivers, you won't find as many species, but a slow flowing brook or smaller river, smaller tributary will have some lovely species on too. And of course, you can watch them from the comfort of your own back garden if you have a garden pond. So, when is the best times to go out and see dragonflies? If you found a nice wetland or nature reserve near you that has some wetlands, well, you want a sunny day. So, a lot of our dragonflies will be far more active on sunny days. They'll be feeding, so you'll have a better chance of seeing them. And our peak dragonfly time for activity is May to September, although we do get some species that hang on for a long time. With some of our records going into December. So there are some species that stay out between September and December. But the best months are probably June and July. Midday onwards, so that early afternoon sunshine is perfect. And then just find a lovely spot to sit and watch them do their thing. They're incredible to watch over water as they're darting about. We can all help dragonflies by creating space for them where it's possible. Ponds and other water bodies are essential, as we've learned, for dragonflies to complete their life cycle. Over the past 100 years, it's been estimated that about 1 million ponds have been filled in and lost. By digging ponds in schools and in gardens and in community green spaces, then we're able to replace that habitat that's been lost. Building a new pond is a really exciting venture, and you can find on the British Dragonfly Society website loads of free resources to help you pick the right size and shape, to choose liners. We've got lists of great plants to put in, as well as how to maintain your pond. So we have everything for how to get started. For a pond, the bigger the better. If there is the space for a larger pond, then of course that will support even more life. But actually, you don't need a huge amount of space to make a big difference. Lots of container ponds are brilliant for dragonflies. So the classic washing up bowl on the left that's been sunk into the ground doesn't need to be sunk either. This is really the middle rowing boat is a really clever idea there for using, and this was put in a front garden, so using a space that we don't really use. And then the barrel on the right here had large red damselflies emerging from the marsh marigolds there on the surface, which is amazing for such a small pond. So it goes to show what a difference you can make. It's not just about putting in water. So if you have a pond and you're thinking about, well, what else can we do? Or if it's an area where you think, oh, we definitely can't put water in here, well, you could still help dragonflies by gardening for insects in general. So the more variety of pollinated plants you put in, the greater variety of insects will be attracted, and then it'll be a buffet for passing dragonflies to have a little munch as they come through that area. So gardening for insects is brilliant. So that whether that's planting pollinated plants or creating bug hotels or just some wilder corners, and of course gardening without herbicides or pesticides, all of that coming together will make a really diverse area for insects. So if you've done some of this, if you have a pond and you've been really thoughtful about how you encourage insects, what kind of species of dragonfly would you get in your pond? Well, we have some species that move in really quickly. So some of those include our small blue damselflies. These are really common on ponds. So if you've created one within a couple of months in the summer, you will get either azure damselfly or blue-tailed. So as you can see, these are like little blue matchsticks. The azure is really blue, and our blue tail is quite dark with that blue tail. Looks a little bit like a magic wand, I think. The large red damselfly is a really common pond visitor. It's really easy to spot this one, lovely, bright and red. And you often get these early in the season. So in the spring, these are the first ones to come out on the pond. Our larger dragonflies, we've got a southern hawker, which is a really beautiful bright green species. It's got these bright green shoulder stripes, um, really beautiful markings all over. They're really inquisitive. So these are the dragonflies that will often come up to you and have a little look what you're doing. But it's not our biggest. Our biggest species is the emperor dragonfly, and they do love ponds. You'll often get just one, and he will not allow any other emperors on the pond. So usually a pond will have one emperor dragonfly, and they are a lovely mix of that sky blue and apple green color, and they really do stick out. Broad-bodied chasers are common pond visitors. These are brilliant to watch. They're quite territorial. We've got a male on the left, which is a lovely powder blue, and then the females are more of a gold color. And you'll often see the male perched up and keeping an eye on his pond territory a bit like we saw in the four-spotted chaser earlier. And then a really common species is the common darter, as the name suggests. Our male on the left is a nice reddy orange, and our female on the right is a bit more of a yellowy orange. This is a species that you see quite late into the summer, so they're still about now and really common on garden ponds. They love to sit and bask in the sun. So if you've got some rocks around the edges of the water, you'll often find these guys sitting on there. So if you're watching dragonflies and you're getting into it, then you can find lots of resources on our website for how to identify them. And you can get in touch with us if you've got some photos and we can help you identify them. And then we ask everybody to submit their records via iRecord. This is an incredible citizen science records database where you can submit any and all wildlife records. And then all of those records get fed into conservation charities like ours. And we use those records to create maps for species so we can look at how species change over time, how they move through the country in reaction to things like climate change. And we can also look at where we find rare species so we can help focus our conservation efforts. So if you submit records through iRecord, you will be helping not just us, but lots of conservation charities to complete their work and look after the species that need it. So you can find lots more on our website. Do take a look for lots of free resources and Dragonfly ID help.